Hey guys, tonight we are going to trace the long, winding, and surprisingly controversial path of a seemingly simple object, the Tibetan Singing Bowl. Imagine, just for a moment, the sound itself. A low, resonant hum that seems to come from everywhere at once. Or don't. It doesn't really matter yet. In your mind, you're holding a small, heavy bowl in the palm of your left hand. The single note from your earlier tap returns, but this time it doesn't fade. It grows. The friction feeds the vibration, and the vibration blossoms into a powerful, resonant hum. The sound is alive now. It's a living thing, born from this simple union of metal, wood, and your own steady hand. You can feel it traveling up your arm, a subtle electric tingle that seems to vibrate deep within your bones. The bowl is no longer just a cool, heavy object in your hand. It's a vibrant, humming engine of sound. This is the essence of it, the core experience that has captivated people for decades. You've just made a standing bell sing. It's cool to the touch, solid, made of a dark, burnished metal that seems to drink the low light in the room. It's unexpectedly weighty, its dense presence a small anchor in your palm. In your other hand, you hold a simple wooden mallet, a wand, perhaps wrapped in a soft layer of felt or suede. You take a breath, a slow and easy one, and gently, with no real force at all, you tap the rim of the bowl. It's a sound that feels less like hearing and more like bathing in a warm, shimmering wave of pure vibration. It's a single, pure, perfect tone that expands outward in a sphere, pushing the silence of the room away from you. It hangs in the air, a shimmering, audible ghost. But that's just the beginning. Now, you press the suede-covered side of the mallet firmly against the outer edge of the bowl's rim, and you begin to move. You circle the rim, a slow, steady, deliberate motion. At first, there's just the soft, uninspiring sound of friction. Wood against metal. It's a bit like a cat sharpening its claws on your worst furniture. You might even wince, thinking you're doing it wrong. It's a sound that promises peace, that whispers of ancient mountaintop monasteries and serene, meditative bliss. But as with most things we dig into on this channel, the story is a whole lot messier and far more interesting than the postcard version. Honestly, the real history is so full of twists, turns, and questionable characters, you probably won't survive this episode without falling asleep, which is, of course, the entire point. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It makes a huge difference. And while you're at it, I'd love to see where and when you're tuning in from. Drop your city and local time in the comments below. It's always a little mind-bending to see our sleepy community stretching all across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Close your eyes. The sound that blooms into the air is instantaneous and absolute. It's not loud, it's not aggressive. But then, something magical happens. As you maintain the pressure and the slow, circling pace, the bowl begins to wake up. That's a key piece of the puzzle right there. The most accurate, if less romantic, name for a singing bowl is a standing bell. Unlike a typical Western bell that hangs and is struck to vibrate, this one rests on a surface or your hand, and its power comes from the sustained vibration of its rim. Historians still argue whether the singing bowl, as we know it today, has any deep, verifiable roots in Tibetan Buddhist or Bon rituals at all. You are holding an object that feels ancient, that sounds sacred, and that carries a name connecting it to one of the most spiritually renowned places on earth. Yet, its passport might be a forgery. Its history might be a story we've told ourselves. The journey to find its true origins won't be a straight line. It will take us through mountain passes, into blacksmith forges, and along dusty trade routes. We will have to sift through myth, marketing, and genuine spiritual practice to get closer to the truth. The sound itself is real. Its effect on you is undeniable. But the story, The story is just beginning. The evidence is shockingly thin. Ancient Tibetan texts are filled with detailed descriptions of ritual objects, musical instruments, and monastic tools. They talk at length about cymbals, longhorns, drums, and most importantly, handbells known as ganta. But these standing singing bowls? They are almost completely absent from the historical and religious record. It's a profound and inconvenient silence. It's as if you were to discover a detailed history of the violin that somehow forgot to mention the bow. The very thing that makes it work seems to be missing from its own story. It's technically classified as an idiophone, which is just a wonderfully fancy term for any musical instrument that creates sound primarily by the vibration of its own body, without the use of strings, membranes, or airflow. A xylophone, a triangle, a cymbal, they're all part of the same family. So, your little bowl is basically the quiet, introspective cousin to the crash cymbals in a rock band's drum kit. Now that you have this beautiful sound filling the space around you, let's poke at the story you think you know. The name itself, Tibetan Singing Bowl, presents a beautiful, complete picture, doesn't it? You can see it. A wise maroon-robed monk, high in the Himalayas, using this very object in a 1,000-year-old ritual. The problem is, that picture is almost certainly a fantasy. When these bowls first began trickling into the West in the mid-20th century, no one was quite sure what they were. They were sold in markets in Kathmandu and northern India, often presented simply as old metal bowls. Some buyers thought they were for eating, perhaps a special kind of dish used for offerings or specific foods. This is a quirky little fact of their modern history. Their initial identity wasn't as a musical or spiritual tool, but as a piece of mysterious antique kitchenware. The central nagging question, the one that kicks off our entire journey tonight, is where they actually come from. So as you sit here, with the drone of the bowl still humming in the air, you are at the heart of the mystery. The sound from the bowl in your hand begins to fade, the vibrations lessen, and the warm tingle in your arm subsides. But as that sound recedes, another takes its place. Jagged, snow-dusted peaks claw at a sky so piercingly blue it almost hurts to look at. Below, a wide, desolate valley stretches for miles, painted in muted shades of ochre, rust, and pale green. The wind is a constant physical presence, whipping at your clothes and carrying the scent of dust, rock, and something wild and clean. But you don't see your singing bowl. Covering an area of about 2.5 million square kilometers, with an average elevation of over 4,500 meters. This geography created a powerful isolation that allowed a unique culture to flourish. But it was never completely cut off. Maybe they were used by village shamans rather than monastery monks. Maybe they came from a kingdom on the periphery, in a region we'd now call Bhutan, or Sikkim, or Ladakh, and the Tibetan label was just a convenient geographical shorthand that stuck. After all, carrying heavy, bronze alloy bowls over high mountain passes doesn't seem like a great business model unless you have a very dedicated and very specific group of customers waiting for them. It's far more likely that their name came from where Westerners first bought them, not from where they were necessarily made or used. The markets of Kathmandu were full of goods that had traveled from across the mountains, and made in Tibet just sounded better to a wide-eyed tourist in the 1960s than made somewhere north of here, we think. The brand was born. Trade routes, the landscape is breathtaking, the spirituality is palpable, but our specific artifact remains elusive. The connection feels more poetic than historic. To find the source of the sound, you realize you have to dig deeper than the soil of this high-altitude world. You have to dig into time itself, to a period before the maroon-robed monks and the great Buddhist monasteries, to an older, wilder Tibet, like treacherous threads, connected Tibet to India, Nepal, and China. So, it's not impossible that these bowls existed. But the fact remains that for an object supposedly central to Tibetan spirituality, The local evidence is ghostly thin. You'd have an easier time proving the existence of the Yeti, frankly. At least he gets a few blurry photos and footprint casts. Not in the old paintings, not on the ancient altars, not in the hands of the lamas leading the ceremonies. It's a conspicuous absence. You ask around, through a translator, showing a picture, or perhaps even a real bowl you've brought with you. An old monk might smile, nod, and say yes, he's seen a bowl like that. He used one for his morning sampa roasted barley flour, mixed with yak butter tea for years. It's a good, solid eating bowl. Another might recognize it as something traders from Nepal bring, something popular with tourists. But a sacred instrument for meditation? A tool for sound healing? You're met with polite confusion. Every breath is a conscious effort, a thin, sharp intake of air that doesn't seem to hold enough life. Forget meditation. If you want a truly altered state of consciousness, just try jogging at 15,000 feet. You'll be seeing visions in no time. This is where the mystery deepens, and the story gets interesting. There's a fascinating concept in Tibetan tradition known as Bayul, or hidden lands. These are secret valleys, earthly paradises said to have been blessed by Padmasambhava, the 8th century master who is credited with bringing Buddhism to Tibet. These Bayul are believed to be places of refuge, prosperity, and spiritual power, which only become accessible to true devotees in times of great strife. It's a beautiful fringe belief, the idea that there are sacred spaces hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right person to find them. Perhaps the singing bowl comes from a kind of historical Bayul, a specific tradition, in a remote region that was never widely documented and has since been lost. It's not a sound so much as a pressure, a vast and profound silence that hums with an energy all its own. The air in the room grows thin, crisp, and cold. You are no longer in your quiet, comfortable space. You are standing on a high pass, somewhere on the roof of the world. You are in the Himalayas. Before you, the landscape unfolds on a scale that your mind struggles to process. This is the image that the name Tibetan Singing Bowl is meant to evoke. A place of stark beauty, spiritual purity, and ancient wisdom. It's the Shangri-La of James Hilton's novel Lost Horizon, a mystical paradise sheltered from the clamor of the modern world. For over a century, the Western imagination has painted Tibet and its surrounding peaks as the ultimate spiritual sanctuary. And it's this powerful, romanticized image that provides the perfect backdrop for an object like our singing bowl. It feels right that such a profoundly peaceful sound would be born in such a majestic and secluded land. But here, standing in the biting wind, you start to see the problem. This land is not gentle. It is severe. Survival here is a daily victory against the elements. The people who call this plateau home are tough, pragmatic, and resilient. And their spiritual practices are deeply interwoven with the fabric of this challenging existence. So you begin your search. You visit the great monasteries, ancient fortresses of faith, like the Patala Palace in Lhasa or the cliffside Gampas of Mustang. You watch the monks in their daily rituals. You see the vibrant, detailed Thangka paintings depicting deities and mandalas. You hear the cacophony of sacred music, the booming of the long Duncan horns, the clash of cymbals, the rhythmic chanting of sutras, the sharp, clear ring of the gana, the handbell, paired with its symbolic thunderbolt, the dorje. You see all of this. This is the historical reality that confronts anyone looking for the bowl's origins. The Tibetan plateau itself is immense. Now, historians still argue whether the stark lack of textual and artistic evidence means the bowls were simply not part of mainstream Tibetan ritual, or if their use was confined to a very specific esoteric practice that has vanished. So your journey across the vast, windswept plateau leaves you with more questions than answers. The crisp air of the high mountain pass begins to feel different. The silence is no longer just vast and empty. It feels watchful. We call it Bon today, but it was likely a diverse tapestry of local shamanic and animistic practices. This is the primal spirituality of Tibet. They might be draped in animal skins, their hair long and matted, their face painted with stark symbols. The shaman's chanting is a guttural, hypnotic drone, a language meant for the spirits, not for you. The drumbeat accelerates, becoming a frantic pulse that seems to shake the very ground. But as with so much of this story, we crash headfirst into a familiar problem: the evidence. Creating a functional sword or an arrowhead is one thing. Creating a finely tuned musical instrument is another. It didn't simply erase Bon. Instead, a syncretism occurred. Local Bon deities were absorbed into the Buddhist pantheon as protector spirits. Perhaps it became a secret, esoteric tool, its use passed down through specific lineages, never written down, its shamanic origins eventually forgotten or intentionally obscured. But this is speculation. It's a compelling story, a thread that feels warm to the touch. But it's a thread that frays into nothing when you pull on it too hard. The Bon connection provides a tantalizing, almost believable origin story, but it lacks the solid anchor of proof. The mystery of who could have made such a complex object remains. To find that answer, you must leave the world of spirits and shamans and step into the roaring heat of the forge. Bon rituals, symbols, and even cosmological ideas were woven into the fabric of this new faith, creating the uniquely vibrant and complex system we now know as Tibetan Buddhism. It's like when your favorite underground band signs with a major record label. The core melody is still there, but it's surrounded by a whole new layer of slick production. This absorption is why you see shamanic elements like spirit traps and ritual daggers used within some Tibetan Buddhist traditions to this day. It's a bit like comparing the skill needed to build a log cabin with the skill needed to build a grand piano. Both use wood, but the technical requirements are worlds apart. There are no ancient Bon texts that describe the forging or ritual use of these standing bells. The search for a definitive link is frustrating, like trying to remember a meme you saw years ago. You know it was there, you remember the feeling, but all tangible proof has vanished into the digital ether. We know from archaeological finds that pre-Buddhist Tibet had metalwork, including bronze objects like mirrors, bells, and ornaments. But creating a singing bowl is a different beast entirely. It requires a sophisticated knowledge of metallurgy, of creating a specific alloy, usually a type of bronze, made from copper and tin, and then painstakingly forging it into a shape that can produce a sustained, harmonic tone. This is sound as an active force, a tool to travel between worlds, to battle hostile entities, and to restore balance. The core of early Bon practice wasn't about achieving a state of peaceful enlightenment. It was about managing the very real and present dangers of the spirit world. Around their neck hangs not a string of prayer beads, but a polished bronze mirror, a milong, used for scrying and deflecting evil. Proponents of the Bon origin theory suggest the bowls were not for meditation, but were potent shamanic instruments. Imagine the shaman, instead of only using a drum, strikes a heavy bronze bowl. The sustained, penetrating hum isn't meant to calm you down. It's meant to induce a trance state, to open a doorway into the spirit realm. It's a sound that could, in this belief system, literally shake a malevolent spirit loose from a person's body. This is where a quirky and fascinating Bon belief comes in, the concept of soul retrieval, or laguk. It was believed that trauma, fright, or the actions of spirits could cause a part of a person's soul, their la, to become lost or stolen, leading to illness and misfortune. The Banpo's job was to journey into the other worlds to find this lost fragment and call it back. Could the resonant tone of a singing bowl have been the homing beacon used to guide that lost soul home? In their hand, they hold a drum shaped like an hourglass, its rhythmic beat the thrumming heart of their ritual. This is not the gentle sound of a singing bowl used for quiet contemplation. This is powerful percussive magic. The banpo is a spiritual technician, the original IC support for the soul. Is your luck failing? Are your yaks mysteriously falling ill? Has a mischievous spirit stolen a fragment of your life force? The banpo is who you call. No ticketing system required. In the world of Bon, you are not separate from nature. You are a small part of a world that is intensely, terrifyingly alive. Every mountain has its spirit, every lake its guardian deity. Unseen forces, gods, demons, and ancestral ghosts are everywhere. They are in the wind that steals your breath, the rock that trips your foot, the sudden storm that sweeps down from the peaks. You turn your back on the imagined silhouette of the grand Buddhist monastery, leaving its organized, scholastic faith behind. Your search for the bowl's origins requires you to travel, not just in space, but in time, peeling back the layers of history. You are descending from the well-trodden paths of established religion into an older, wilder spiritual landscape. You are looking for Bon. Before Buddhism arrived in the 7th and 8th centuries, bringing with it a sophisticated system of philosophy, monasticism, and a vast body of scripture, the Tibetan plateau was home to a constellation of indigenous beliefs. The figure at the center of this world is not a monk poring over texts, but a shaman, a banpo. Picture this figure. You watch one of these rituals unfold. The air is thick with the sharp, clean scent of burning juniper branches, a purifying smoke that cleanses the ritual space. And here, in this raw elemental context, the idea of the singing bowl reappears, but with a new and different potential purpose. It's a powerful and romantic idea. It gives the bowl a purpose that feels as ancient as the mountains themselves. Historians still argue whether the disparate, nomadic, and semi-nomadic tribes of pre-Buddhist Tibet possessed this level of advanced, specialized craftsmanship on any wide scale. What we do know for a fact is that when Buddhism did arrive in Tibet, it engaged in a remarkable process of assimilation. So it is plausible that the singing bowl, if it existed in Bon culture, was absorbed along with everything else. The hypnotic drone of the shaman's chant fades, replaced by a rhythmic, metallic clang. The air, once sharp with the scent of juniper smoke, is now thick with the acrid smell of burning coal and hot metal. You've left the wild plateaus of spiritual speculation and arrived in a place of sweat, muscle, and fire. You are standing in the shadows of an ancient forge, a dark, cavernous workshop where the raw elements of the earth are tortured into new forms. The liquid metal inside glows with the intensity of a tiny sun, and the hammering begins. A team of smiths, perhaps 2 or 3, surround the anvil. The metal is hammered, then returned to the furnace to be reheated, then hammered again. This cycle of heating and hammering is called annealing, and it's crucial. The Newars were, and still are, legendary artisans, renowned for their skill in bronze casting, wood carving, and painting. The bowl you hold in your hand is not just a spiritual tool, it's a feat of engineering. It's a testament to a deep, intuitive understanding of acoustics and metallurgy. The perfect curve, the uniform thickness of the walls, the precise alloy of its metals, these are not happy accidents. They are the result of a deliberate, demanding, and highly skilled craft. The bowl in your hand is a container of frozen music, its potential locked into its very molecular structure by the fire and the hammer. Its sound is not just a random property. It is the entire reason for its difficult birth. But even knowing how it was made doesn't fully answer the question of why. For that, we need to look at what other sound-making tools were already present in the monasteries it supposedly called home. For centuries, they were the go-to artists and architects for patrons, not just in Nepal, but in Tibet as well. Many of the most beautiful Tibetan statues and artifacts you see in museums were actually made by Newari hands. Historians still argue whether the most sophisticated ancient bowls were a product of Tibetan smiths or these highly skilled Newari artisans who then traded them northwards over the mountains. Hammering bronze makes it hard and brittle, and if you don't periodically soften it by reheating it, the bowl will simply shatter under the hammer blows. You can see the immense skill involved. The smiths must not only shape the bowl, but also maintain a consistent thickness throughout. A thin spot or a thick spot will ruin the resonance, creating a dead bowl that refuses to sing. They move with a fluid, practiced rhythm, a percussive dance of muscle and fire. There is nothing meditative about this. It's loud, dangerous, and physically exhausting work. One of the more popular modern myths you might have heard is that ancient bowls were made by monks, chanting mantras as they hammered. It's a lovely image, but it's pure fiction. Historical Tibetan society, like many pre-modern cultures, had a caste-like system. Metal workers, like butchers and blacksmiths, were often part of a lower social stratum, sometimes even considered unclean, because their work involved fire and the transformation of elements. A high-ranking lama or a meditating monk would have been about as likely to be found forging a bowl as a modern CEO would be found cleaning the office toilets. The master smith holds the puck with his tongs, turning it with precision after each strike, while the others deliver powerful, ringing blows with their heavy hammers. Clang, clang, clang. The sound is deafening, a physical force that vibrates through the soles of your feet and into your chest. With each coordinated strike, the flat disc begins to change shape. It curls upwards at the edges, slowly, painstakingly, taking on the shallow curvature of a bowl. He pours it carefully into a small, disc-shaped mold. A sizzle, a hiss of steam, and the metal begins to cool into a solid, flat puck, a metallic pancake that holds the promise of a future sound. But this is only the first step. The real magic and the brutal, back-breaking labor is yet to come. This is where the singing bowl, regardless of its true purpose or cultural origin, would have been born. Your eyes adjust to the gloom, lit by the fierce orange-white heart of the furnace. It's a simple clay and stone structure, but it pulses with a heat so intense it seems to make the air shimmer. This isn't just one thing, but a precise recipe. The primary ingredient is copper, which gives the bowl its warm hue and tonal softness. Added to this is tin, which creates the alloy we know as bronze. The ratio is critical. Too much tin, and the bowl becomes brittle, prone to cracking. Too little, and it will be too soft to hold a vibration, producing a dull thud instead of a clear, ringing tone. This isn't guesswork. It's a form of embodied science, a knowledge passed down through generations of master craftsmen. They didn't have digital scales or chemical analysis. They judged the mix by the color of the molten metal, the way it moved, the subtle scent it gave off. It's a lost art, like trying to bake a perfect loaf of bread using only your sense of smell. A pair of large, hand-operated bellows, likely made of goatskin, are being pumped by a young apprentice, his face slick with sweat. With each rhythmic push, a gust of air is forced into the furnace, and the coals inside roar to a brighter, angrier life. The sound is a great, sighing beast, inhaling and exhaling fire. This is the primal engine of all metallurgy, a technology that fundamentally changed the course of human history. The ability to achieve and control temperatures high enough to melt stone and release the metal within is the very definition of alchemy. In a crucible nestled within the glowing coals is the raw material, a molten cocktail of metals. A master smith, a man with arms like knotted ropes and a face etched with the lines of intense concentration, uses a long pair of tongs to lift the crucible from the fire. Once the puck is cooled enough to hold its shape, but is still glowing red-hot, it's placed on a heavy anvil. This process is repeated dozens, maybe hundreds of times. This fiery, violent birth stands in stark contrast to the bowl's serene and peaceful modern reputation. And here lies a quirky historical fact. Some of the best metalworkers in the Himalayan region were not Tibetan at all, but were Nuari craftsmen from the Kathmandu Valley in Nepal. So, As you watch the final shape emerge from the fire and the hammering, you realize the immense physical reality of the object. The deafening clang of the forge fades away, and the air cools once more. You leave the sweat-soaked world of the blacksmith behind, your ears still ringing slightly from the phantom rhythm of the hammers. In his right hand, he holds the dorj, or vajra in Sanskrit. It's a small, stylized object, usually cast in bronze or brass, representing a thunderbolt or a diamond. It's a symbolic weapon of indestructible power, representing firm compassion and the masculine principle of skillful means. The ghanta and dorj are ornate, explicitly symbolic and active. They are picked up, wielded, and used to make a sharp, declarative sound. Your singing bowl is plain, unadorned, and passive. It rests. It needs to be coaxed into sound. The ghanta's tone is a call to action. The bowl's tone is an invitation to stillness. They seem to belong to two entirely different worlds of sound and intention. This is one of the strongest pieces of evidence against the bowl as raw as a traditional monastic instrument. It's like finding a quiet, minimalist rocking chair in the middle of a flamboyant, gilded throne room. It just doesn't quite fit the established decor. It looks a bit like a miniature, ornate dumbbell with two spherical or lotus-shaped heads that meet at a central grip. It's heavy, solid, and feels potent even just to look at. You find yourself back inside the stone walls of a Tibetan monastery. But this time, you're not looking for your singing bowl. It has a handle, often topped with the face of a wisdom deity or half of a dorj, and a clapper suspended inside. When he rings it, the sound is high, clear, and piercing. It cuts through the air with an assertive, feminine energy, representing wisdom and the direct realization of emptiness. Together, the dorj and the ghanta, the thunderbolt, and the bell, masculine and feminine, compassion and wisdom, represent the perfect union of opposites, the heart of the tantric path to enlightenment. They are almost never used separately. During rituals, the lama will move them in a series of prescribed, graceful gestures called mudras, ringing the bell at specific points in the liturgy while manipulating the dorj. You're on a different mission. You're here to understand the soundscape that already existed, to see what musical tools were considered undeniably central to Tibetan Buddhist practice. You are here to meet the undisputed king and queen of the monastic orchestra, the bell and the dorj. In the hands of a practicing lama, you see them. In his left hand, he holds the ghanta, the bell. It is undeniably a bell, not a bowl. This is the primary, sanctioned, and textually supported sound tool of Tibetan Buddhism. Its use is described in exhaustive detail in religious texts. Its symbolism is profound and complex. Its presence on altars and in ritual is universal. The sound of the ghanta is meant to call the mind to attention, to invoke deities, and to delight the celestial beings who are drawn to the ceremony. It's a sound with a very specific job to do. Now, place your singing bowl next to this royal couple. The contrast is immediate and stark. Of course, the monastery is filled with other sounds. You hear the deep, guttural chanting of prayers, a form of overtoned singing where a monk can produce multiple notes at once. It's a sound that seems to emanate from the very core of the earth. You hear the mournful blast of the kanglings, trumpets traditionally made from a human thigh bone. The vast majority of metal bowls found in any culture are for holding things: food, water, grain, offerings. A bowl that happens to ring nicely when struck is a delightful bonus, but it doesn't automatically make it a sacred musical instrument. The historical fact is that metal bowls of all shapes and sizes were common household and monastic items throughout the region for centuries. They were durable, easy to clean, and practical. The idea that a subset of these bowls were made with special acoustic properties is the central claim we reinvestigating. It's a startling, eerie sound meant to remind practitioners of the reality of impermanence and death, and to summon wrathful deities. The official, card-carrying members of the ritual instrument club are the bell, the dorge, the horns, and the drums. Your singing bowl is still an outsider, a mysterious applicant with a questionable resume. It doesn't seem to fit the job description of a traditional Tibetan ritual instrument. Its sound is too quiet, its form too simple, its purpose too undefined. This deepens the mystery, but it also forces you to look in a new direction. If the bowl wasn't for making music in a monastery, what if its original purpose was far humbler, connected not to sound, but to silence and sustenance? Not exactly spa music. Then there are the massive Duncan, the long telescoping copper horns that can be up to 16 feet long. They produce a low elephantine moan that echoes for miles across the valleys, calling monks to prayer. This is the authentic symphony of Tibetan ritual. It is powerful, dramatic, and often dissonant to the Western ear. It is designed to be a full-body experience, to shake the practitioner out of complacency and into a heightened state of awareness. The serene, harmonious drone of a single singing bowl feels out of place in this wild, sacred orchestra. It's like bringing a ukulele to a heavy metal concert. While technically a stringed instrument, it just doesn't serve the same purpose. This leads us to a fascinating fringe theory about the bowl's identity. Perhaps the bowl was never meant to be a musical instrument at all. Some scholars and collectors have proposed that certain antique bowls might have been used for scrying, a form of divination. The practitioner would fill the bowl with water and then make it sing. As the vibrations created ripples and patterns on the water's surface, the scryer would gaze into the bowl to look for images, signs, and portents of the future. The shimmering, dancing patterns on the water, known as Chladni figures, can be incredibly complex and beautiful. This is a practice found in various cultures around the world, from the famous mirror of Nostradamus to the water-gazing techniques of ancient Egypt. This theory is compelling because it gives the bowl a specific ritual function that is both esoteric and doesn't compete with the established musical instruments. Historians still argue whether the primary function of these metal vessels in the Himalayan region was acoustic or simply utilitarian. The simplest explanation is often the most likely. So, having examined the existing soundscape of the monastery, you are left with a clearer picture. The grand, cacophonous orchestra of the monastery fades, and a profound quiet takes its place. You are no longer surrounded by the high stone walls of a fortress of faith, but are walking along a dusty, sun-baked road somewhere in the ancient lands of northern India. The air is warm and thick with the scent of spices, wood smoke, and dry earth. You have traveled back further in time, beyond the arrival of Buddhism in Tibet, to the very roots of the faith. You are walking in the footsteps of the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, around the 5th century BCE, and you are here to investigate the simplest, most fundamental bowl of all. Look at the figures you pass on this road. You see merchants with their laden carts, farmers driving their oxen, and small groups of wandering ascetics, their bodies lean and weathered by the elements. Among them, you see men and women with shaved heads, draped in simple patched robes of saffron or ochre. These are the early bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, the first Buddhist monks and nuns. They walk with a quiet dignity, carrying almost no possessions. But there is one thing each of them has: a simple bowl. This is the alms bowl, or patra. It is not a musical instrument. It is not a ritual object in the ceremonial sense. It is a tool of profound humility and a symbol of an entire way of life. According to the monastic code, a Vinaya, this bowl was one of the very few possessions a monk was allowed to own. Each morning, they would walk silently from house to house in the local village, not begging in the modern sense of pleading for money, but simply standing, waiting. Householders who wished to gain merit would place a spoonful of food rice, curry, vegetables into the bowl. The monk would accept whatever was given, without judgment or even thanks, and then move on. It was a beautiful, symbiotic relationship. The laity provided physical sustenance for the monks, and the monks, by their example of living a life dedicated to spiritual liberation, provided spiritual sustenance for the laity. The bowl was the physical link in this chain of mutual support. It represented the monk's complete dependence on the community and his renunciation of a life of self-sufficiency. He could not store food. He could only eat what was placed in his bowl that day. It was a constant, daily reminder of interdependence and the transient nature of material life. The rules were even specific about the material. The original bowls were to be made of either iron or clay, explicitly forbidding precious materials like gold, silver, or bronze. This was to prevent vanity and attachment. The bowl was meant to be functional, not beautiful. Its value was in its emptiness, not its craftsmanship. As you contemplate this simple, profound object, you can see a direct, if distant, ancestor to your singing bowl. It is, after all, a bowl from the same spiritual lineage. But its purpose is inverted. The alms bowl is defined by what you put into it. The singing bowl is defined by what comes out of it. Yet the symbolic connection is powerful. Could the resonant bowls we know today have evolved from this humble beginning? Here we encounter a quirky and legendary tale, the story of the Buddha's own alms bowl. Legend says that when Siddhartha achieved enlightenment, the kings of the four cardinal directions each offered him a bowl made of a precious substance, one of sapphire, one of jade, and so on. Not wishing to show favoritism and adhering to his vow of simplicity, the Buddha magically merged the four bowls into one. This legendary composite bowl was said to have been passed down through generations, becoming one of Buddhism's most sacred relics. This story is fascinating because it introduces the idea of a special, almost magical bowl right at the origin point of the faith. Historians still argue whether this tale and others like it might have inspired later craftsmen to create their own special, high-quality bowls, perhaps imbuing them with symbolic or even acoustic properties. The historical fact is that as Buddhism spread from India into other parts of Asia, the form and material of the alms bowl began to change. Different cultures adapted it to their own climates and artistic traditions. In Southeast Asia, you might see bowls made from lacquered wood. In China and Japan, they were often beautifully crafted from wood or ceramic. And in the metalworking cultures of the Himalayas, it's entirely plausible that they began to be crafted from bronze alloys. A durable metal bowl would certainly last longer than a clay one on the punishing high-altitude trade routes. It's not a huge leap to imagine that a culture with a deep expertise in bronze casting, like the Newars of Nepal we met in the forge, might start producing very high-quality alms bowls. And what if, by chance or by design, some of these metal alms bowls were made so well that they happened to ring with a beautiful, sustained tone when struck? It's a compelling idea. Perhaps a monk, while cleaning his bowl after his daily meal, tapped it with his wooden chopsticks and was surprised by the pure, clear sound it produced. Maybe that sound was found to be conducive to his afternoon meditation. It's a simple, organic origin story. It bypasses the need for the bowl to be an official ritual instrument and instead presents it as a kind of happy accident, a personal discovery. It's the spiritual equivalent of discovering that you can play a tune by tapping on a specific set of water glasses. It's not a formal instrument, but it works. This theory elegantly connects the singing bowl back to the very foundations of Buddhism, grounding it in the practice of the earliest monks. It explains why the bowls are simple and unadorned. It explains their association with monks and monasteries. But it leaves a crucial part of the mystery unsolved. If these resonant alms bowls originated in Tibet or the surrounding regions, why? Do we find similar, and sometimes even older, resonant metal bowls in other neighboring cultures? The path of the bowl did not just lead north from India into the mountains of Tibet. It also spread east and west. And to understand the full story, you must broaden your search. The sound is echoing from more than one place. The path you walk is no longer straight. The idea of a single linear history, traveling neatly from Siddhartha's alms bowl north into the Himalayas, now splinters into a dozen different trails. The sound you are chasing is not a single echo, but a chorus coming from multiple directions. To follow it, you must leave the dusty plains of ancient India and ascend into the vibrant, chaotic, and artistically supercharged world of the Kathmandu Valley in Nepal. You arrive not in a desolate mountain landscape, but in a bustling medieval city-state like Bhaktapur or Patna. The air is dense, a rich stew of smells, sweet incense from Sis, a hidden temple, the sharp tongue of chili and turmeric from a street-side food vendor, the damp, earthy scent of packed earth alleyways. The architecture is breathtaking. Pagoda-style temples with intricately carved wooden struts rise stories. High, their tiered roofs a graceful dance against the sky. The sheer density of art is overwhelming. Every doorway is framed with carvings. Every courtyard holds a shrine. Every public square is a living museum. And everywhere there is the sound of making. A soft tapping from a woodcarver's workshop, the rhythmic clatter of a hand loom, and, most importantly for your quest, the familiar metallic ring of hammers on bronze. You follow that sound and find yourself in a district teeming with metalworkers. These are the descendants of the Nuari artisans we met in the forge, the legendary masters of their craft. Remember them? You saw their skill in the abstract heat of creation. Here you see their legacy in 1,000 finished forms. Shopfronts are crammed with gleaming metalwork. Statues of Hindu and Buddhist deities stare out with serene, knowing expressions. Ornate ritual objects, butter lamps, offering dishes, and yes, bells and dorias of exquisite detail are piled high. And among them, you see bowls. Hundreds of them, bowls of all sizes, from tiny ones that fit in the palm of your hand to massive cauldrons that would take 2 people to lift. Some are plain and functional, their surfaces bearing the faint, concentric rings of the hammer. Others are etched with mantras, symbols of good fortune, like the 8 auspicious signs, or intricate floral patterns. You speak with a shopkeeper, a man whose family has been working with metal in this very spot for generations. You show him your singing bowl. He smiles, a familiar, knowing smile. He calls it a bata, a simple Nepali word for bowl. He might tell you it's a good one for offerings, or for serving special foods during a feast. He then pulls out another bowl, almost identical in shape and tone, and explains it was made in his family's workshop just last month. He tells you that traders have been buying these bowls from his family for decades, taking them to sell to the tourists in Kathmandu's main square, or even sending them abroad. Many of them, he notes with a little shrug, are sold as antique Tibetan bowls. It's just good business. The name gives them a story, a mystique that a simple Nepali made. Bowl lacks. It's the difference between selling a simple sparkling wine and selling champagne. Here, the plot thickens considerably. The historical fact is that the Kathmandu Valley was a major production center for high-quality metal goods that were traded throughout the Himalayas. It's entirely possible, even probable, that many of the oldest and most beautiful Tibetan singing bowls were not made in Tibet at all, but were crafted here, in Nepal. Ethnomusicologists and art historians continue to debate the direction of influence. Did Tibetan patrons commission specific types of bowls from Nuari smiths, or did the Nuers create these resonant bowls as part of their own craft tradition, which then found a market in Tibet? Trying to untangle the cross-cultural threads here is like trying to determine who started a food fight in a cafeteria. By the time you arrive, everyone is covered in mashed potatoes and pointing fingers at everyone else, But the search doesn't end in Nepal. Your journey now takes you back into India, but to a different world of sound. You find yourself in a refined courtly setting, listening to a classical music performance. But there's no sitar, no tabla. Instead, the musician sits before a semicircle of porcelain and bronze bowls. This is the Yala Tarang, which translates to water waves. It's a fascinating and ancient melodic instrument. Each bowl is filled with a different amount of water, tuning it to a specific note in the scale. The musician then plays melodies by gently striking the rims of the bowls with small bamboo sticks. This is a quirky but crucial discovery. Here is a documented historical tradition in India, with roots going back centuries, that explicitly uses simple bowls to create tuned, complex music. This isn't about a single meditative drone. It's about melody and performance. The existence of the Yala Tarang proves that the concept of using a bowl as a sound source is not unique to the Himalayan region. It's part of a broader South Asian musical vocabulary. It shatters the idea that some lone genius monk on a mountaintop was the first person to figure out that a bowl could sing. The idea was already in the air, in the water, and in the culture. So, where does this leave you? You now know that the master craftsmen of Nepal were producing huge numbers of high-quality bowls that were branded as Tibetan. You know that in India, a tradition of playing music on tuned water-filled bowls has existed for ages. The Tibetan Singing Bowl is starting to look less like a singular, mysterious artifact and more like a regional celebrity from a very large and talented family of resonant objects. Its fame might be more a result of modern marketing and Western fascination than any unique ancient lineage. The search for a single definitive birthplace is becoming a fool's errand. The trails lead everywhere and nowhere at once. This realization is both frustrating and liberating. Perhaps the question isn't where did the singing bowl come from? Maybe the better question is far more fundamental. Why do resonant metal objects and the sounds they make hold such power over us in the first place? It seems to be a universal human instinct, from the grand church bells of Europe to the gongs of Southeast Asia. To find that answer, you have to move beyond geography and history and into the physics of sound and the psychology of healing. You pull back from the tangled map of Himalayan trade routes and dusty Indian roads. The specific search for the bowl's geographic origin is feeling like a dead end, a series of nesting dolls where each one you open just reveals another, slightly different, empty container. So you change your approach. You zoom out. You are no longer looking for this specific object, but for the universal human impulse behind it. You are now exploring a much larger territory, the ancient and cross-cultural use of sound as a tool for healing and altering consciousness. Your journey takes you first to ancient Greece, into a temple dedicated to Asclepius, the god of medicine. You walk through marble colonnades into a tranquil inner sanctuary. Here, patients suffering from all manner of ailments would come for a process called dream incubation. They would sleep within the temple grounds, hoping that the god would visit them in their dreams and reveal a cure for their illness. But it wasn't just about quiet sleep. Priests, the therapeuti of the Asclepian cult, from which we get our modern word therapy, would use various tools to prepare the patients and create a healing atmosphere. And what did they use? Music, chanting, and specific sound frequencies. Wind chimes would tinkle in the gentle breeze. The soft plucking of a lyre would soothe the anxious mind. Priests would chant incantations, their voices rising and falling in hypnotic cadences. The entire temple was a carefully engineered acoustic environment designed to lull the conscious mind into a receptive state where healing could occur. The Greeks understood, on an intuitive level, that sound wasn't just for entertainment. It was a form of medicine that could directly impact the body and spirit. They believed that harmony in music could restore harmony in the human organism. It's not so different from the modern-day patient in a hospital bed listening to calming music to reduce their stress and pain. The technology has changed, but the fundamental principle has not. Now, leap across the globe and land in the sun-scorched outback of Australia. You are sitting around a crackling fire at dusk with a group of Aboriginal elders. One of them raises a long, hollow wooden tube to his lips. It's a didgeridoo. He begins to play, and a low, otherworldly drone fills the night air. It's a sound that seems to vibrate right out of the earth itself. The player uses a technique called circular breathing, allowing him to sustain the note for minutes on end without a break, creating a continuous, unbroken river of sound. This is not a performance for an audience. This is deep ceremony. In Aboriginal tradition, the vibrations of the didgeridoo are believed to have immense healing power. The sound is used to clear energetic blockages, to connect the listener with the ancestral spirits of the dream time, and to restore balance to the community. They have been using it this way for, by some estimates, over 40,000 years. This historical fact makes the didgeridoo one of the oldest known sound-healing instruments on the planet. When you compare its continuous low-frequency drone to the sustained hum of a singing bowl, the functional similarity is striking. Both instruments are designed to bypass the analytical mind and speak directly to the body through the language of vibration. It seems our nervous systems have a factory preset for responding to a good, deep hum. It's probably why we find the purr of a cat so relaxing. From Australia, you travel to the verdant jungles of the Amazon basin. You sit in a ceremonial hut with a shaman, an awuskero. The air is thick with the scent of sacred tobacco smoke. The shaman begins to sing. He sings the ikaros, the magic songs. These are not just melodies. They are seen as living, intelligent energies. Each ikaro has a specific purpose: to call a certain plant spirit, to cleanse a person's energetic field, to provide protection, or to guide a person's visionary journey. The shaman might shake a rattle made of leaves. The shakapa, its soft, shushing sound washing over you like a gentle rain. Here, sound is not an ambient background. It is the primary active ingredient in the healing work. The shaman's voice is the surgical tool. What do all these disparate traditions, Greek lyres, Aboriginal didgeridoos, Amazonian ikaros have in common? They all recognize that sound has a physical, measurable effect on the human state. They predate modern scientific terms like entrainment or cymatics, but they are based on the same observations. They know that a rhythmic drumbeat can drive a group into a collective trance. They know that a mother's lullaby can physically calm a distressed infant. They know that certain sounds can make you feel whole, and others can set your teeth on. This brings us to a quirky tidbit from the world of acoustics. Have you ever heard of the brown note? It's an urban legend about a specific, ultra-low frequency sound, supposedly between 5 and 9 hertz, that can cause a person to lose control of their bowels. While scientifically debunked in its more dramatic claims, the myth speaks to a deep-seated cultural understanding that sound can have powerful, involuntary, and sometimes downright embarrassing physical effects on us. Historians still argue whether there was a pan-Eurasian shamanic technology of sound that spread across the continents in prehistory. Was the use of resonant instruments like bowls, bells, and gongs an idea that was independently discovered by many different cultures? Or was it a specific set of techniques that traveled, mutated, and adapted as it moved from place to place? This is a chicken and egg problem on a continental scale. Did the technology create the practice, or did the need for the practice drive the invention of the technology? Placing the Himalayan singing bowl within this vast, global context changes your perspective entirely. It no longer seems like such a strange and mysterious anomaly. Instead, it appears as the Himalayan region's unique contribution to this universal family of sound-based healing tools. It may not have the documented antiquity of the didgeridoo or the melodic complexity of the Greek lyre, but it fits the pattern. It's a simple, elegant technology for generating a sustained, harmonic vibration. Whether it was used by a Bon shaman, a Buddhist monk, or a village healer, its fundamental purpose aligns with a practice as old as humanity itself. The bowl's power might not come from a secret Tibetan lineage, but from its ability to tap into this ancient, shared human response to therapeutic sound. But for an object to travel and an idea to spread, it needs a road. And in the ancient world, there was no road more important than the one paved with silk. You are standing at a crossroads. But it's not a simple intersection of two dusty paths. It's a confluence of continents. To your west lies the grandeur of Rome and the intellectual ferment of Persia. To your east, the ancient and powerful empire of China. And you are standing in the middle of the legendary network of trade routes that connected them all, the Silk Road. This isn't one single road, but a sprawling, shifting web of trails, caravan paths, and sea lanes that stretched for over 4,000 miles, linking civilizations and changing the world for more than 1,500 years. The air here is a babel of languages and a kaleidoscope of cultures. You see a Sogdian merchant, a famously skilled middleman, haggling over the price of a bolt of shimmering Chinese silk. A caravan of Bactrian camels, their double humps laden with spices from India and glass from Rome, plods patiently past. You smell the exotic perfumes of Arabia, see the glint of jade from Khotan, and hear the murmur of Buddhist philosophy being debated by monks traveling from one oasis monastery to another. The Silk Road was the world's first great information superhighway, and it didn't just carry goods. It carried ideas, technologies, religions, languages, artistic styles, and even diseases. This is the environment where our singing bowl, or at least the knowledge required to make it, could have traveled. Remember the challenge of creating a bowl that sings? It requires a specific bronze alloy and a sophisticated forging technique. This wasn't common knowledge. Metallurgical breakthroughs were a form of high technology, valuable secrets that could give one culture a military or economic edge over another. And the Silk Road was the primary conduit for this kind of technological transfer. A new method for casting bronze developed in Persia could, over the course of decades, find its way into the hands of a craftsman in a Himalayan kingdom. Imagine a blacksmith in Samarkand, a bustling hub on the Silk Road, who has perfected a technique for making bronze mirrors that are not only clear, but also happen to produce a pleasing ring when tapped. A traveling merchant sees this, recognizes the potential, and carries a few samples with him on his next journey east. He might trade them in the markets of Ladakh or Nepal, where a local smith sees the object, is fascinated by its acoustic properties, and spends years trying to replicate it, eventually adapting the technique to create a bowl instead of a mirror. This kind of slow, organic diffusion of technology is how innovation spread in the ancient world. It wasn't downloaded. It was carried, copied, and transformed one caravan at a time. It's a bit like a game of telephone played with hammers and fire across a continent. The message might get a little distorted, but the core idea gets through. The historical fact is that the development of bronze itself, the essential material for a classic singing bowl, spread along these same ancient pathways. The Bronze Age didn't happen everywhere at once. It began in the Near East and gradually radiated outwards. The knowledge of how to smelt copper and tin together to create this revolutionary new metal was a trade secret worth its weight in, well, bronze. The regions of the Himalayas were relative latecomers to the Bronze Age, likely receiving the technology from their neighbors in India, Persia, and China. So the very existence of bronze bowls in the Himalayas is a testament to the power of these ancient trade networks, This is where you encounter a particularly quirky and fascinating artifact, the Tarim mummies. Discovered in the Tarim Basin, a desolate region along the Silk Road in what is now western China. These mummies date back as far as 1800 BCE. The startling thing about them is their appearance. They have reddish blonde hair, long noses, and other distinctively European features. DNA analysis has confirmed that they were of Caucasian origin. They were found buried with textiles and artifacts that show a blend of Eastern and Western influences. These ancient people are a stunning physical confirmation of just how far back the connections between East and West go. They are ghosts of the Silk Road, living and dying thousands of miles from their ancestral homes. So, could the singing bowl have been a product of this incredible cultural melting pot? Historians still argue whether the specific technology for making resonant bowls was a unique Himalayan innovation or an import that was perfected and adapted locally. Perhaps the idea came from the West, where the casting of large church bells was a highly developed science. Or maybe it came from the East, from China, with its long and sophisticated tradition of casting ritual bronze vessels and gongs. The Shang and Zhou dynasties of ancient China, beginning around 1600 BCE, produced some of the most complex and beautiful bronze work the world has ever seen. The idea of a finely tuned metal object for ritual use was certainly not foreign to them. The Silk Road provides a perfect explanation for how all the necessary ingredients, the metal, the technology, and the spiritual ideas about sound could have ended up in the same place at the same time in the Himalayas. The region was not an isolated fishbowl, but a crossroads. It was perfectly positioned to receive influences from all directions and synthesize them into something new. The singing bowl might not be purely Tibetan, or Nepali, or Indian. It might be a true child of the Silk Road, a hybrid artifact with a multicultural passport stamped in Samarkand, Lhasa, and Kathmandu. Its hum could be the sound of Chinese metallurgy, Indian spirituality, and Persian science all vibrating together in a single harmonious chord. This theory feels satisfyingly complex and worldly. It rescues the bowl from the narrow confines of a single origin story and places it on a global stage. It acknowledges the interconnectedness of human history. But as the story of the bowl was transmitted from the ancient world to the modern one, a new layer of myth was added, one that had less to do with ancient trade routes and more to do with cosmic energies and planetary alignments. The story was about to get a whole lot more spaced out. The dusty, chaotic energy of the Silk Road fades, and you find yourself in a very different environment. The light is soft, the air smells of sandalwood incense, and the gentle, ambient music is probably playing on a cassette tape. You are in a New Age bookshop somewhere in California, circa 1985. Crystals of every shape and size are artfully arranged on glass shelves. Books with titles like Crystal Healing for the Modern Mystic and Awakening Your Inner Chakra are stacked on tables. And over in the corner, nestled on a plush purple cushion, is a singing bowl. Here, the story of the bowl takes a sharp metaphysical turn. The shopkeeper, a woman with kind eyes and a flowing batik dress, comes over to tell you about it. She explains that this is not just any bowl. It is an authentic antique Tibetan singing bowl, forged by monks in a secret monastery high in the Himalayas, and it's not made of simple bronze. It is, she whispers with an air of profound significance, made from the 7 sacred metals. This is the myth that, more than any other, has come to define the singing bowl in the popular Western imagination. It's a beautiful, poetic, and incredibly compelling story. The tale goes that true, ancient singing bowls were forged from a celestial alloy of 7 different metals, each one corresponding to one of the 7 planets of ancient astrology, which included the sun and moon, and one of the 7 chakras, or energy centers of the body. You listen, captivated, as she breaks it down for you. Gold, she explains, corresponds to the sun and the heart chakra. Silver corresponds to the moon and the third eye chakra. Mercury, for the planet Mercury and the throat chakra. Copper, for Venus and the sacral chakra. Iron, for Mars and the root chakra. Tin, for Jupiter and the solar plexus chakra. And finally, lead, for Saturn and the crown chakra. The idea is that this perfect, cosmically aligned blend of metals is what gives the bowl its magical healing properties. The sound it produces is not just a sound. It is the harmonious music of the spheres, a vibrational tonic that can rebalance your chakras and align your personal energy field with the energy of the cosmos itself. It's an absolutely brilliant piece of storytelling. It takes a mysterious object and imbues it with a deep, complex, and spiritually satisfying narrative. It links the bowl to astrology, to esoteric anatomy, and to ancient alchemy. It's no wonder this story became so incredibly popular. It's the ultimate secret history, an irresistible piece of lore that makes the owner of such a bowl feel like they possess a truly powerful and sacred artifact. It's far more romantic than saying, "This is a bronze bowl, probably made in Nepal, that makes a nice sound because the smith was really good at his job." The seven metal story gives the bowl a soul. It's the perfect joke for the spiritually inclined. Why settle for a boring story when a cosmically aligned one is available? Now, let's gently pull the thread on this beautiful tapestry. The historical fact is that the system of 7 classical planets linked to 7 specific metals is a Western one. It has its roots in Hellenistic and Babylonian astrology and was a cornerstone of European alchemy for centuries. The association is very clear. Gold sun, silver moon, etc. This system was not, however, a significant part of mainstream Tibetan Buddhism or astrology. While Tibetan cosmology is incredibly complex, with its own intricate systems of elements and energies, this specific one-to-one correlation between these 7 planets and these 7 metals is a Western import, not a Himalayan export. Furthermore, we run into a major metallurgical problem. Remember the intense heat of the forge? The different metals in this sacred alloy have wildly different melting points. Gold melts at about 1064 degrees Celsius, while lead melts at a mere 327 degrees Celsius. Trying to forge them all together into a single, stable, resonant alloy would be a blacksmith's nightmare. The lead and tin would vaporize long before the copper and gold were properly incorporated. And mercury? It's a liquid at room temperature, and its fumes are famously toxic. Including it in a red-hot crucible would be a spectacularly bad and likely fatal idea. It's less like baking a cake and more like trying to make a salad where one of the ingredients is a ghost and another is a hand grenade. So, has anyone actually tested the antique bowls to see what they're made of? Yes, they have. And this is where the myth collides with modern science. Chemical analysis of hundreds of antique singing bowls, conducted by metallurgists and collectors, has revealed a very consistent and much simpler reality. The vast majority of high-quality old bowls are made of a high tin bronze, sometimes called bell metal. This is typically an alloy of about 75 to 80% copper and 20 to 25% tin. They are, in essence, bronze bowls. Sometimes trace amounts of other metals, like iron from the forging tools or impurities in the ore, are present. But there has never been a verified antique bowl found to contain all 7 of the sacred metals, and certainly not gold or silver in any significant quantity. Historians still argue whether the 7 metals myth was a genuine, though mistaken, folk belief that got attached to the bowls, or a brilliant marketing story invented in the 1970s or 80s by dealers looking to increase the value and mystique of their wares. It's a classic chicken and egg problem of modern mythology. Did the story create the demand, or did the demand create the need for a better story? This doesn't mean the bowls aren't special. As we saw in the forge, creating a high tin bronze, all that sings is an incredible act of craftsmanship. But its magic comes from the skill of the smith and the laws of physics, not from a mystical planetary recipe. Yet the myth persists, powerful and unshakable, because it speaks to a deep human desire to find connection and meaning, to believe that a simple object can hold the secrets of the universe. The story of the 7 metals might not be factually true, but it became a crucial part of the bowl's journey to the West. It gave the bowl its modern identity. But this identity was forged not in an ancient fire, but in a crucible of cultural, political, and spiritual upheaval. The gentle, incense-scented air of the New Age bookshop dissolves. The soft lighting gives way to the harsh, bright glare of a world fracturing under immense political pressure. You are no longer in a place of calm introspection. You are in Tibet, in the middle of the 20th century, and the world is about to change forever. The serene, romanticized image of a timeless Shangri-La is about to be shattered by the brutal realities of geopolitics. To understand how the singing bowl became a global phenomenon, you must first understand the story of the people and the culture that were torn from their homeland. For centuries, Tibet had existed in a state of relative isolation, a high-altitude kingdom governed by a unique theocracy with the Dalai Lama at its spiritual and temporal head. This isolation was not just geographical, it was also political. But in 1950, that changed. The newly formed People's Republic of China, under Mao Zedong, invaded Tibet, claiming it as a historical part of China. The initial years were a tense period of coexistence, but the friction between the occupying Chinese forces and the Tibetan people grew steadily. The Chinese government sought to impose secular, communist reforms, which clashed directly with Tibet's deeply religious and traditional society. The breaking point came in March of 1959. Massive popular uprising erupted in the capital city of Lhasa, fueled by fears that the Chinese were planning to abduct the young 14th Dalai Lama. The uprising was brutally crushed by the People's Liberation Army. In the chaos and violence that followed, the Dalai Lama, fearing for his life and the future of his people, made a fateful decision. Disguised as a simple soldier, he fled Lhasa under the cover of darkness. His journey was an epic ordeal. For 17 days, he and his small entourage traveled on foot and on horseback, crossing the treacherous, snow-covered passes of the Himalayas. They evaded Chinese patrols, battled blizzards, and relied on the help of loyal Khampa guerrilla fighters. Finally, on March 31, 1959, they crossed the border into India, where they were granted political asylum. This escape is one of the most dramatic and pivotal events in modern Tibetan history. It was not just the flight of a single man. It was the flight of the soul of a nation. The Dalai Lama's successful escape opened the floodgates. In the weeks, months, and years that followed, an estimated 80,000 Tibetans followed their leader into exile. They were monks, nuns, nobles, farmers, and nomads. They left behind everything they had ever known: their homes, their lands, their monasteries, and the relatives they would never see again. They undertook the same perilous journey over the mountains, often with little more than the clothes on their backs and whatever small, precious belongings they could carry. And what did they carry? They carried the seeds of their culture. Monks smuggled out sacred texts, the sutras and tantras that formed the core of their religious knowledge. Artists carried the skills to create intricate Thangka paintings and statues. And many families simply carried small, portable valuables that they could trade for food and shelter. Among these items were, of course, metal bowls, jewelry, and other household goods. A sturdy, old bronze bowl, once used for morning tea, suddenly became a vital piece of survival currency. This is a crucial historical fact. The first wave of what we now call antique singing bowls to appear in the markets of Nepal and India were not sold by dealers, but by desperate Tibetan refugees. They were trading pieces of their past for a chance at a future. This tragic exodus created the Tibetan diaspora, a global community of people determined to preserve their culture in the face of its destruction back home. The Dalai Lama established a government in exile in Dharamshala, India, which quickly became the vibrant heart of Tibetan life outside Tibet. Monasteries were rebuilt, schools were founded, and cultural institutes were established, all with the singular goal of keeping the flame of Tibetan identity alive. This is where you encounter a quirky, poignant detail of this cultural preservation. The traditional art of butter sculpture, creating incredibly intricate, colorful offerings from yak butter, faced a unique challenge in the hot, humid climate of India. The butter would melt. The artists had to adapt, learning to work in air-conditioned rooms and sometimes incorporating modern materials like margarine to keep their creations from turning into a colorful puddle. It's a small, almost funny example of the immense challenges of transplanting a high-altitude culture to a subtropical one. Historians still argue about the precise nature and extent of the cultural destruction that occurred inside Tibet, particularly during the violent years of the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s and 70s. Thousands of monasteries, temples, and cultural sites were destroyed, and countless religious artifacts were melted down or ruined. But the narrative is complex. Some argue that the singing bowl tradition, being largely non-existent in the first place, couldn't have been destroyed, while others suggest that if it was a minor, localized folk practice, this period of upheaval would have been precisely the kind of event to wipe it out completely. The displacement of the Tibetan people is the critical event that brought their culture and their belongings onto the world stage. It created a supply of antique metal objects in the markets of South Asia, and it created a powerful, sympathetic narrative that resonated deeply in the West, the idea of a peaceful, spiritual nation being crushed by a totalitarian power captured the world's imagination. Tibet became a cause célèbre, and into this charged atmosphere, a new kind of traveler was about to arrive, one who wasn't looking for political asylum, but for a very different kind of liberation. The stark, black-and-white images of political struggle and desperate flight begin to bleed into vibrant, psychedelic color. The air of solemn refugee camps gives way to the sweet, hazy smoke of a different kind of gathering. You are no longer focused on the people leaving Tibet, but on a new group of people arriving in the East. You are on the hippie trail. It's the late 1960s and early 1970s. A cultural revolution of a very different sort is sweeping across the Western world. Young people, disillusioned with the materialism, conformity, and political turmoil of their own societies, the Vietnam War, the Cold War, the struggle for civil rights, are looking for alternatives. They are searching for authenticity, for spiritual enlightenment, for a different way of being. And for many of them, the path to that new consciousness leads east. You find yourself in an old, brightly painted bus, rattling its way from Istanbul to Tehran, or maybe on a crowded third-class train, chugging from Delhi to Varanasi. This is the legendary hippie trail, an overland route that took hundreds of thousands of young Westerners from Europe across Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan to the spiritual meccas of India and Nepal. It was a rite of passage, a shoestring budget pilgrimage for a generation of seekers, adventurers, and dropouts. Life on the trail was a mix of exhilarating freedom, mind-expanding experiences, often aided by readily available local substances, and the occasional, very real danger of dysentery. It was the original find-yourself gap year. Long before Instagram made it look glamorous. These travelers were not your typical tourists. They weren't there to see monuments, snap photos, and go home. They were there to immerse themselves, to learn to transform. They were drawn to the ancient spiritual traditions of the East: Hinduism, Buddhism, Sufism. They sat at the feet of gurus, practiced yoga and meditation, and studied philosophies that offered a profound contrast to the spiritual emptiness they felt back home. And when they arrived in places like Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal, they found a city that felt like a mystical paradise. It was cheap, it was exotic, and it was the gateway to the Himalayas. It was also, as you know, the primary marketplace for goods and artifacts coming out of Tibet. In the crowded stalls of Freak Street, the epicenter of hippie life in Kathmandu, these Western seekers encountered the objects left behind by the Tibetan diaspora. They found Thangka paintings, prayer wheels, jewelry, and of course, the simple, heavy metal bowls. Imagine you are one of these travelers. Your mind is wide open, primed for mystical experiences. You pick up one of these strange, heavy bowls. You've never seen anything like it. The seller, a canny local merchant or perhaps a Tibetan refugee, sees your interest. He knows you're not looking for an eating bowl. You're looking for something more. So he picks up a wooden stick and makes the bowl sing. For a young person from London or Los Angeles, whose primary experience of music is 3-minute rock songs on the radio, this sound is a revelation. It's ancient, alien, and deeply meditative. It's the sound of the exotic, spiritual East they have been searching for. They ask what it is. And here, the modern identity of the singing bowl is born. The seller, using a bit of salesmanship, and perhaps genuinely blending local legends, tells them it is a Tibetan singing bowl used by monks for meditation and prayer. This is the moment of branding. The object is given a name and a story that fits perfectly with the romantic spiritual quest of the buyer. It's a much better sales pitch than, "This is a high-quality bronze food bowl that happens to make a cool noise." The joke's on the buyer, but they're happy to be in on it. The historical fact is that two American musicians, Henry Wolfe and Nancy Hennings, played a pivotal role in introducing the sound of the singing bowl to the West. In 1972, they released an album called Tibetan Bells. The album featured the resonant, otherworldly drones of the bowls, and it became an underground hit in the burgeoning world of ambient and New Age music. For most people in the West, this album was their very first exposure to the sound. Wolfe and Hennings didn't claim to be experts in Tibetan ritual. They were artists, captivated by a unique sound they had discovered on their travels, and they presented it as a form of cosmic celestial music. Their work cemented the bowl's identity as an instrument for creating atmospheric, meditative soundscapes. This brings us to a quirky character in our story, a man named Dick Hogle, better known as Jangle. He was a fixture on Freak Street in Kathmandu in the 70s, an American traveler who became one of the first and most prominent Western dealers of singing bowls. He would buy bowls from refugees and sell them to other travelers, becoming a key node in the network that moved these objects from the Himalayas to the West. He and others, like him, were the conduits, the translators who helped shape the narrative around the bowls for a Western audience. Historians still argue about the degree of invention versus authentic transmission in this process. Were the Westerners simply discovering a pre-existing tradition of using bowls for sound, or were they effectively inventing a new tradition by taking a utilitarian object and assigning it a new spiritual function based on their own needs and projections? The truth is likely somewhere in the messy middle. The bowls and their resonant properties were real. The Western hunger for mystical tools was real. The encounter between the two created a new cultural phenomenon, a classic case of cross-cultural adaptation and rebranding. The hippie trail. Travelers who bought these bowls became their first Western evangelists. They brought them home not as souvenirs, but as tools for their own spiritual practice. They used them in their meditation groups, their yoga classes, and their nascent healing circles. They shared the sound and the story with their friends. The singing bowl had found its new home, not in a Himalayan monastery, but in the communes, yoga studios, and suburban living rooms of the West. Its journey from an anonymous metal bowl to a branded spiritual commodity was complete. But what? Was it about that sound that was so captivating? The next step in our journey is to look at what science has to say about these good vibrations. The bus on the hippie trail sputters to a halt, and the hazy, incense-filled air of Kathmandu clears, replaced by the sterile, controlled environment of a modern laboratory. You've traded your tie-dye for a lab coat. The journey now takes a turn, from the anecdotal and historical into the measurable and scientific. We've heard the stories, the myths, and the legends. Now it's time to ask a different question. What is actually physically happening when a singing bowl sings, and why does it have such a profound effect on the human brain and body? You stand before a sophisticated audio analyzer, its screen, displaying the sound of a singing bowl not as a feeling or a story, but as a complex waveform. The first thing you notice is that the bowl doesn't produce just one single frequency. When you strike it or make it sing, it erupts in a rich symphony of sounds. There is a fundamental tone, the lowest and usually loudest frequency, which we perceive as the main note of the bowl. But layered on top of that are multiple simultaneous overtones or harmonics. These are higher frequency tones that are whole number multiples of the fundamental. This richness of harmonics is what gives the bowl its unique, shimmering, and complex character. It's the difference between a pure, sterile sine wave generated by a machine and the rich, organic sound of an acoustic instrument. A cheap, poorly made bowl might have dissonant overtones that clash with each other, creating a sound that feels muddy or unpleasant. A high-quality, well-crafted bowl has harmonious overtones that create a sense of spaciousness and coherence. It's this complex acoustic cocktail that you're really hearing. Now, let's look at what happens when these sound waves enter your ear and travel to your brain. This is where we encounter a fascinating neurological phenomenon called brainwave entrainment. Your brain is constantly generating tiny electrical pulses or brainwaves, which can be measured with an EEG machine. These brainwaves correspond to different states of consciousness. Beta waves, 14 to 30 Hz, are associated with active, waking consciousness, state you're in when you're working, problem-solving, or feeling anxious. Alpha waves, 8 to 13 Hz, are linked to relaxed, calm, and meditative states. Theta waves, 4 to 7 Hz, are associated with deep relaxation, dreaming, and creativity. And delta waves, 0.5 to 4 Hz, occur during deep, dreamless sleep. Brainwave entrainment is the theory that the brain has a tendency to synchronize its own brainwave frequencies with the rhythm of external stimuli, such as sound. When you listen to the sustained, rhythmic, and harmonically rich drone of a singing bowl, the hypothesis is that your brainwaves can gradually shift from the busy beta state towards the calmer alpha and even theta states. You aren't just relaxing because the sound is pretty. The sound may be actively, physically nudging your brain into a more relaxed and meditative state. It's like giving your brain a gentle push on a swing, encouraging it to fall into a natural, calming rhythm. This leads us to a specific acoustic trick that singing bowls are particularly good at, producing binaural beats. This occurs when you present two slightly different frequencies to each ear. For example, if your left ear hears a tone at 200 Hz and your right ear hears one at 210 Hz, your brain, in an attempt to make sense of this, perceives a third phantom beat at the difference between the two frequencies, in this case, 10 Hz. This 10 Hz beat falls squarely in the middle of the alpha brainwave range. Some practitioners use two singing bowls, tuned slightly apart, to intentionally create this effect, believing it's a powerful shortcut to a meditative state. It's a bit of a neurological joke. Your brain gets punked into chilling out. Historical fact is that the concept of binaural beats was first discovered in 1839 by the Prussian physicist and meteorologist Heinrich Wilhelm Dove. It remained a scientific curiosity for over a century until it was picked up in the 1970s by researchers like Robert Monroe, who popularized its use as a tool for exploring altered states of consciousness. The marriage of this old scientific discovery with the ancient sound of the singing bowl is a very modern phenomenon. Beyond the brain, what about the rest of the body? Sound is, after all, a physical vibration. When you place a singing bowl directly on the body, a common practice in sound bath therapies, you can literally feel the vibrations penetrating your tissues. Proponents of this technique claim that these vibrations can have a therapeutic effect, akin to a form of subtle internal massage. They believe it can help to release muscle tension, improve circulation, and clear energetic blockages. This is where you find a quirky modern application. Some veterinarians and animal shelters have begun using singing bowls to calm anxious or traumatized animals. They find that the gentle, low-frequency hum can have a remarkably soothing effect on dogs and cats, reducing stress behaviors and helping them relax. It seems that good vibrations aren't just for humans. While there is a growing body of research on the therapeutic effects of sound, the specific claims made for singing bowls are still being studied. Scientists are still arguing whether the benefits reported by so many people, reduced stress, lower blood pressure, improved mood, are due to specific, measurable physical effects like brainwave entrainment, or if they are primarily the result of the placebo effect, combined with the simple, undeniable power of taking time for yourself to lie down, be still, and listen to a calming sound in a safe environment. The truth is likely a combination of both. The sound is a powerful catalyst, but the intention and the setting are what unlock its full potential. The science provides a fascinating possible explanation for why the bowls feel so good. It gives a modern, rational language to an ancient, intuitive experience. It helps us understand that the magic of the bowl is not necessarily supernatural, but is rooted in the very real physics of sound and the intricate biology of our own nervous systems. And it's this combination of ancient mystique and modern validation that has propelled the singing bowl from a niche hippie artifact into a global wellness superstar. The cool, quiet precision of the laboratory dissolves, and you find yourself swept up in a powerful current of global commerce and culture. You are no longer looking at a single bowl on a lab bench. You are witnessing millions of them being manufactured, marketed, and shipped all over the world. The journey has arrived in the present day, a time when the singing bowl has completed its final, remarkable transformation from a humble utensil to a mysterious artifact, to a niche spiritual tool, and now, finally, to a mainstream wellness commodity. You walk into a sleek, minimalist yoga studio in a bustling Western city like New York or Berlin. The air smells faintly of lavender essential oil and eco-friendly cleaning products. At the front of the class, the instructor, clad in expensive athleisure wear, ends the final resting pose, Savasana, not with a gentle word, but with the clear, resonant chime of a small singing bowl. The sound has become a signifier, a cultural shorthand for, and now, peace. It's the closing bell for the stock market of stress relief. Next, you scroll through your social media feed. An influencer, bathed in the golden light of a perfect sunset, is hosting a full moon sound bath on a scenic clifftop. Dozens of people are lying on yoga mats, their eyes closed in blissful repose, while the host moves among them, playing a vast and shimmering array of crystal bowls. These aren't the traditional metal bowls of our journey. They are their modern cousins, made from pure crushed quartz, and they produce a piercingly pure, high-frequency tone. They are beautiful, expensive, and perfectly photogenic. The ancient, humble bronze bowl has been given a glamorous, crystal-encrusted makeover for the Instagram age. Then, you open your laptop and browse a massive online marketplace. You type "singing bowl" into the search bar. The results are staggering. Thousands upon thousands of listings appear. There are tiny, machine-made bowls from China, sold for a few dollars as novelty gifts. There are intricately etched bowls from India, marketed with the familiar seven metals myth. There are high-end, hand-hammered bowls from Nepal, sold with certificates of authenticity. You can buy them in sets, tuned to the notes of the chakras. You can buy them with custom engravings. You can get next-day delivery. The journey that once required a treacherous, months-long overland trek on the hippie trail can now be completed with a single click. This explosive growth is a classic story of globalization. The demand created by those first Western seekers has blossomed into a full-fledged international industry. Workshops in India and Nepal, which once might have been small family affairs, are now significant production centers, employing many people and exporting their products worldwide. This is a crucial historical fact of the bowl's modern life. For many artisans in the Himalayan region, the global wellness trend has created a vital economic lifeline. The Western appetite for authentic spirituality is in a very real sense putting food on the table for families in Kathmandu. But this commodification comes with its own set of problems and ironies. A very thing the original hippies were trying to escape, materialism and commercialism, has now fully embraced the tools they brought back. The singing bowl, once a symbol of anti-consumerist spiritual seeking, is now a product, sold with marketing strategies, profit margins, and supply chains. It's a bit like a rebellious punk rock band from the 80s suddenly finding their angriest song being used in a commercial for a luxury SUV. The message gets a little diluted. This leads to a quirky and slightly cynical observation. You can now download singing bowl apps on your smartphone. For a small fee, or by watching a few ads, you can have a digitally recorded, perfectly looped simulation of a singing bowl drone available at any time. It's the ultimate expression of the bowl's journey into the mainstream. A sound that was once tied to a physical, resonant object born of fire and muscle can now be conjured from the silent, solid-state memory of a device in your pocket. Historians and cultural critics still argue about the implications of this process. Is the commodification of the singing bowl a form of cultural appropriation, where the West has stripped a sacred object of its original context and meaning for its own superficial use? Or is it a more positive example of cultural exchange and adaptation, where a useful technology has been successfully shared and transformed to meet the needs of a new audience? The answer, as always, is not simple. It's a messy mix of both. The original context was already murky, as we've spent this entire journey discovering. And the superficial use of finding a moment of peace in a frantic world is, for many people, profoundly meaningful. The journey of the bowl from sacred object, or at least an object perceived as sacred, to wellness commodity mirrors the path of many other Eastern practices that have become popular in the West. Yoga, once a deep and demanding spiritual discipline aimed at achieving liberation from the cycle of rebirth, is now widely practiced as a form of physical fitness and stress management. Meditation, a rigorous technique for training the mind, is now packaged in mindfulness apps as a tool for improving corporate productivity. The singing bowl fits perfectly into this paradigm. It's accessible, it's non-denominational, and its effects are immediate and palpable. You don't need to study ancient texts or adopt a new belief system to appreciate the calming hum of bowl. It asks nothing of you but to listen. In a world that is louder, faster, and more demanding than ever before, the simple, profound quiet offered by this ancient-seeming object has become an incredibly valuable and highly marketable commodity. But after all this globe-trotting, after all the history and all the commerce, what is left? All that remains is you and the sound. The vast global marketplace with its endless digital shelves dissolves into pixels and fades to black. The cacophony of commerce, the buzz of social media, the sleekness of the yoga studio, it all recedes, leaving you once again in the quiet stillness of your own space. The long globe-trotting, time-traveling journey is over. And after all of it, the Bon shamans, the Buddhist monks, the Nuari smiths, the Silk Road merchants, the hippie seekers, and the modern scientists, you are right back where you started. In your hand, you feel the cool, solid weight of a single bowl dot. So, what is it that you are actually holding? If you're still with me, and statistically, some of you have probably been happily asleep since we were talking about yak butter, you now know what the bowl isn't. It's almost certainly not from Tibet in any exclusive sense. It wasn't. Made by chanting monks on a sacred mountaintop. It's not made of a magical planetary alloy of 7 metals. Its story is not one of pristine, unbroken lineage from an ancient, enlightened source. Its history is a wonderful, beautiful mess. Like a plate of spaghetti that has been through a minor earthquake, you now hold an object that is, in many ways, a historical orphan, a beautiful, resonant mystery. Scholars may debate its provenance. Forever, collectors will argue about its age and authenticity, and marketers will continue to spin beautiful tales about its origins. But the simple, stubborn fact remains that there is almost no verifiable proof connecting the standing bell we call a singing bowl to ancient, mainstream Tibetan ritual dot. And here's the final, most important turn in our entire journey tonight. This is not a failure. The lack of a definitive historical pedigree is not a weakness. It is the bowl's greatest strength. Because it has no fixed, dogmatic story, it is free. And because it is free, it can become whatever you need it to be. It is a blank slate of sound. It's an empty vessel, not just for the alms of a Buddhist monk, but for the meaning that you choose to pour into it. Its true story is not the one. We've spent the night chasing through history books and across continents. Its true story begins now, with you, Dot, so you can now, at your next dinner party, if you have the energy to talk about this stuff, confidently explain that it's all much more complicated than the pretty story on the box. You can talk about Nuari, artisans, and the Yalatarong and the hippie trail, or you can forget all of it. You can let the entire complicated, contradictory history slide away like water, because none of it is required to experience the bowl itself. Take a breath, hold the mallet, gently tap the rim. That pure, clear tone that blooms in the air doesn't care about the Silk Road. It doesn't need a certificate of authenticity. Now press the mallet to the rim and begin to move. As the bowl starts to hum, as that living vibration grows and fills the space around you, as you feel it tingling in your hand and traveling up your arm, that feeling is real. That is the only truth that has ever really mattered. The science we looked at gives us a language to describe this feeling: brainwave entrainment, harmonic resonance, binaural beats. It's a useful map, but it's not the territory. The territory is the simple, undeniable experience of this sound washing over you. It's a sound that asks for nothing. It doesn't ask you to believe in anything. It doesn't demand your devotion. It simply offers a point of focus, an anchor in the chaotic sea of your thoughts. It's a tool for creating a small, sacred space in a loud world. It's a technology for manufacturing a moment of peace. The bowl in your hand is a survivor. It has survived the fire of the forge and the endless blows of the hammer. It has survived centuries of being used as a simple eating dish. It has survived the trauma of a nation's displacement, being carried over mountains as a last resort. It has survived being discovered, misunderstood, rebranded, and commercialized. And after all that, it is here, in your hand, still able to produce a sound of profound and simple beauty. Its convoluted past has brought it to this quiet, simple present. The journey is complete. The circle closes. All that is left is the sound and the stillness that follows. And so, the long and winding story of this simple object can drift away now, its many threads loosening and dissolving into the quiet dark, like sugar melting into warm water. There is nothing left to figure out, no more mysteries to solve, no more trails to follow through the dust of history. The journey is done. Let the names and the dates, the myths and the facts, the arguments and the science all recede, becoming just faint, distant murmurs, the softest echo of a story that has already been told. The cool weight of the metal in your hand becomes just a memory of weight, and the last, lingering hum of its song fades completely, merging back into the greater silence of your room. A silence that now feels deeper, calmer, and more settled than before. All that is left is this moment, this quiet, this peace. There is only the gentle rise and fall of your own breath, a soft and steady rhythm that has been with you all along. Follow that breath. Feel the subtle movement in your chest, the easy release of each exhale. There is nothing else you need to do. There is nowhere else you need to be. You are safe here, anchored in the stillness. Let the gentle tide of sleep pull you softly away from the shore of your day. Just rest. Just be. Sleep now.